This is Jennifer Gonzalez welcoming you to episode 234 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. In this episode, we're going to learn about 4 fun theater games you can play to make any subject come to life. About 5 years ago, I did an episode all about the importance of movement in learning. If you want to listen, it was episode 119. The basic gist is that students learn better when movement is added to a lesson in some way. There's a lot of research behind this. It can be purposeful movement that actually has a connection to the material being studied, like gestures and pantomime that represents pieces of the content. Or it can just be general movement added in to break up the monotony of sitting for too long. The episode covers all that research and offers lots of easy, fun ways to build movement into your instruction. If you haven't heard it or read it and you're looking for something to energize your lessons, I would recommend you check it out. Today's episode fits right in with those ideas. I'm talking with Jocelyn Greene, a theater educator who runs an organization in New York called Child's Play, which offers theater classes, camps, and residencies in schools. Part of their work includes going into classrooms and playing games that get kids up on their feet, improvising and playing their way through various scenarios. Quite a few of these games are the kind that can work really well with any kind of academic content, giving students an opportunity to apply what they're learning and process it in fun and novel ways. In this episode, Jocelyn is going to teach us how 4 of these games work and how they can get kids to engage with academic content, so you can take them into your own classrooms and give your students a bit of fun. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the Wired Classroom for sponsoring this episode. Curious about tech integration but unsure where to start? The Wired Classroom, a free monthly newsletter brought to you by Edutopia, is your new go-to guide for all things ed tech. Whether you have questions about the latest tools, ethical AI use, or using technology to help craft better lesson plans, assessments, and more, the Wired Classroom is your ultimate resource, packed with expert insights, innovative strategies, and practical tips tailored to your unique role as an educator. It's designed to enhance your teaching and help drive deeper engagement. Recent issues have covered topics like 7 AI tools that help teachers work more efficiently and helping students use AI creatively without the temptation of cheating. To join Edutopia's community of educators already leveraging tech to transform their classrooms, head to cultofpedagogy.com/wired to supercharge your pedagogy. Support also comes from Everfi. Hello to all the dedicated educators out there. Are you eager to equip your students for success in both their careers and personal lives, yet find yourself racing against the clock? Everfi is your go-to solution. Their digital lessons, which align with state standards and boost the prestigious ISTE seal, are crafted to empower your students to excel in our dynamic world. Engage and inspire with interactive, self-paced lessons meticulously designed by content experts. These lessons cover essential real-world skills, from financial literacy and workforce readiness to character building, health, and wellness, and are tailored for students across all grade levels. Best of all, thanks to Everfi's generous partners, these research-based resources come at no cost to all K-12 schools, districts, and students. That's right, absolutely free, and many districts are already single sign-on enabled through Clever or ClassLink. As we rev up for the back-to-school season, there's no better time to give your students a head start on their bright futures. Visit cultofpedagogy.com/Everfi, that's EVERFI, to get started today for free. Now here's my conversation with Jocelyn Greene about classroom theater games. Hey, Jocelyn, welcome.
Thanks, Jen. So happy to be here.
We are going to be talking about games today. And so you came to us with this whole collection of theater games that you play and how they can really be helpful with getting kids to learn content better. So before we get into that, just tell us a little bit about the work you do, and then we'll talk a little bit about why these games are so good. And then we're going to actually give examples of 4 different games that teachers can just try tomorrow if they wanted to.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, I just want to say I'm so happy to be here. I really love what you do and your podcast. I listen to it as someone who is not, educated in education. Really, first and foremost, it is so helpful. Everything you do
Thanks.
and all your guests. So, a little bit about I founded Child's Play NY in 2009 as a theater arts program. So
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of where I come to this. And it is really a place where kids can tap into their imagination and their own intrinsic abilities and like level all that up through acting techniques. And the goal of the theater program itself was never to make kids more actors, right? But so that they could get really good at the skills that actors possess, which I do feel are manifold. So it's like, thinking on your feet and collaborating and really just achieving a lot through this theater modality, right? And having
Mm-hmm.
a lot of fun. And we work in about 20 different schools in New York, and I have a team of about like 45 independent teachers who are amazing artists, but the curriculum that we've developed as we go into the schools is really games based. And I realized, you really don't have to be an actor remotely or a theater artist to do them, because there's a sort of helpful scaffolding that improv naturally has. And when you kind of follow that structure, the kids will take over, and their own imaginations and sense of play and sort of ability to live in that moment really kind of thrives. And so then when you apply curriculum on top of all that, it's just a really neat way that I've found that educators can make the things that they're trying to teach that might otherwise feel like a heavy lift feel a lot more fun and playful.
Mm.
And then the kids are like practicing all these other skills. So I've, as I've gone through my own sort of self-taught training, I've been learning, okay, the social emotional learning, that's like what actors do first and foremost, right? It's like you're stepping into someone else's shoes. Or
Mm-hmm.
executive function skills. It's like working memory and turn taking and active listening and impulse control. These are all skills that you have to use when you are working in this challenging way of like a simple game. It actually is like requiring all this higher order skills.
So lots of
Yeah.
benefits. And by the way, I didn't mention this before, but you have all of what we talk about today is going to also be included in a guest blog post that you have written that sort of lists off all the benefits of these theater games. And we're going to have all four of the games there. We're going to have embedded YouTube videos. So if this is compelling to anybody that's listening, definitely head over to the post, and they're going to have much more detailed information than what we're going to cover today. One thing that struck me, well, first of all, I guess two questions about implementing these games. One is, teachers are always saying, I don't have time. I don't have enough time to add one more thing to what I'm already doing in class. So what do you say to that?
That is such a good point. And I really don't want this to feel, I never want it to feel like this is some extra thing to layer on, because really what it should do is just support the learning. So think about what you are trying to achieve, whether it's like, okay, we need to teach New York State geography, or I really want these kids to understand location, or we're working on a final project about the neighborhood. There are sort of theater games for all of these things,
Mm,
and ways that the kids then just kind of cement the learning. And it's really
mhm,
just a way to make sure that they get what you are actually trying to reinforce, especially when it comes to kind of memorizing things, which can feel like such a tedious task. I mean, that's actually something that actors have to do. It's like a core part of your job description, like memorize your lines, right? So the idea of memory and creating the gamification of memory is a thing that
mm,
actor training is like really does. So it's a lot of physical stuff that you do, and we'll get into that like in the landmarks games. It's like, the body knows more than the brain sometimes. And so there's this
mm,
like kinesthetic learning then and knowledge that happens where kids will access even multiplication tables or something through games in this way that they might not otherwise if you're just like, oh, sit down and remember this stuff. It certainly helps with, anything language based, of course, like, anything creative. If you're like, oh, there's writer's block, or how do we just start a story? These are games where I think about this as like you're writing on your feet, because again, there's like an instinct to make believe that comes from a body place, not necessarily a head place, right? And
Yeah.
you're actually in collaboration with other people, so it's so much teamwork, right? So much group work can happen, and really getting good at it by yes anding, that like classic improv rule. But the teamwork then leads to better story making. And I say story making, but it could also be about persuasive writing. This can be about, recollection and a sort of explanation of history. And the whole thing is really like when we pretend to be someone else, even if it's just a slightly different persona, like a docent at an art gallery, or, a news anchor in this kind of play-based world, like we level up our persona, and it's sort of research backed, and I have links to that in the blog too. It's called the Batman effect. I think it's so interesting. And your kids, young kids will actually behave better when they are asked to become another kind of person, right, who is a hero or somebody in charge. And I think that is applicable then down the line, whether it's like an eighth grader who's pretending as if they are, again, like a museum curator or something, but they're experts at the thing already. So it's just sort of empowering. Then they're able to share the knowledge that they researched even more fluidly. So kind of creating these big, almost long form improv-y type games scaffolded in such a way that young people can enter them and say, aha, I will become this other person who has, expertise. And I'm sharing it with you, not as myself, Jocelyn, but as, hey, welcome to the, wildlife news. I'm here today to tell you, like, it's so much more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's worth carving out the time, the benefits that you're going to get from setting aside a little extra time to play these games is going to be worth whatever sacrifice you might think of more time sitting in seats just consuming written or verbal content.
Correct. I
Yes.
think you'd find that at the end, I mean, maybe, the focus group would be like, well, if you do the worksheet version of this, or you do the on your feet version of this, how much more are kids getting from it? But
Right.
also there's like, we're really talking about other things, joy, belonging, and all of that kind of is buy-in, come to school because we're going to do this fun thing.
Yeah.
And that's important, because if kids are like, well, I don't really want to show up, but it's like, oh no, this is super fun.
Yeah.
When we get to play in this way, then they're going to keep, the learning will inherently happen because they're there.
Okay. So then that leads me to my other question, which is, in order to make these games fun, in order to make them work, you have to get kids to participate. And one thing that struck me when I was watching your videos is that you have in those videos a group of kids who clearly have some experience with improv and acting. They have actors' personalities.
Yeah.
They're very enthusiastic and confident. And I was trying to picture some of the kids that I have worked with, say, like here in Kentucky when I was a teacher. And I'm like, I can definitely see some kids being like, nope,
No.
I'm going to nope right out of that. I am too
100%.
shy.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome that?
This is such a great question. And I think, there's a couple ways in. One thing is, I wouldn't start with like, we're doing the big show of the museum gallery walkthrough. No, right? Do start simple. And if this is something you're curious about, there are neat little circle games where there's just everybody contributes one thing. I have a gift for you, or, what are you doing? Or these kind of, and again, these are theater games. I did not invent most of them. They're like Viola Spolin speaks about them. Second City has them. They're improv games that I'm sort of like, kind of tethering down into our classroom world. But the circle games are ways where people can, contribute a small thing. So you just start small, however you want, or
Mm-hmm.
it's just you jump in with a name and a gesture, and then a
Mm-hmm.
different name that's not your name and a gesture. Or, it's like, what is the very first way that you can get everybody collaborating and jumping in and trying something and being like, you know what, this year we're going to try a couple theater games. Now you will get some kids who are like, I'm going to pass, right? And I
Mm.
think it's a-okay to let students sit sometimes in, but create a place for that. Like there's an audience box, and what is the
Mm.
audience responsible for? Like taking care of the performers, clapping, saying 3 2 1 action, like saying and scene, or when are these, and again, each game is different, but where people can hang up the emotions in a game like Four Corner Emotion on the wall, and then DJ the music in a game like, Landmarks, or something where you do want music, or
Mm.
turn the lights on or off. Like they can almost be backstage contributors until
Mm-hmm.
they're ready to jump in also. And I
Yes.
think that it's contagious. I mean, I really do believe that there's a lot of, and frankly, you might not even want to say theater games or drama games unless you do, right? But you can just say games, because there might already be a preconceived notion, in middle school or something, where it's like, I don't do theater, right? That's okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, it's really, this is not for people to become actors. Like,
Right.
I am not. My parents are actors. My husband's an actor. We don't. No, I'm kidding. But we really don't need. It's not about that as much as I love actor training. It's like about
Mm.
taking that training and applying it to the the core things we want our young people to have, right, and grow into. So
Yeah.
that's the sense of connectedness is there, even if they're DJing, they're part of the show.
Yes.
Giving them that job, and then rotating in and out. If you start with volunteers of kids who are ready to go, and then, or group kids mindfully, maybe there's this, the groups of, some of these games can really be intentionally and thoughtfully made, so that you have some kids who are ready to be like the leaders of the slideshow game and narrating it, and other kids who are doing the poses in the tableaus. We'll get to it, but that's a less heavy lift for them.
Mm. Mm-hmm. It's a quieter kind of
Totally.
yeah. Okay, those are all such good suggestions. And I love that they can opt out, but then they can sort of still participate in smaller ways, which I think is such a good bridge versus just saying, like, no, I just don't do it at all, giving
Yeah.
them something else to do.
And teachers also can model the idea of like, this is new for me. And
Yeah.
I'm a little scared. Listen, I'm not a performer, but I think it could be fun. Here, let's do
Yeah.
it together. And like,
Yes.
bring kids along with them in that way.
Awesome. All right, let's get into the games.
Okay.
So the first one we have is Slideshow. What is Slideshow?
Slideshow, I mean, it really is it's in the name, right? It's like as if you were presenting a bunch of pictures. Like, my uncle was telling me about his vacation. That was a slideshow I had to sit through as a kid. But this is like slideshow now with social media takes on a whole other level. And I think it's really fun for kids to think that they're almost creating a reel or something like that, like
Mm-hmm.
you'd see on Instagram or TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're not just static pictures. They can start that way, again, sort of starting simple, but they are could be really dynamic. Like, oh, this photo has it's actually a video. Let's turn it on. Click, and then this tableau comes to life. So the idea is that one person is narrating a series of events that get acted out by a smaller group of people. So there is like a title that will help ground the game and obviously connect with your curriculum exactly how you want it to be. Maybe the kids brainstorm the titles beforehand. Maybe you have them all ready to go because you know exactly the kind of thing you want them to be able to recall or narrate. And the photographs are really just the kids in still tableaus, still pictures. And the kind of structure I've given it is every kid's, maybe there's 4 kids who are as if they're posing. Their backs are to the audience. The narrator says, oh, this is a picture of fill in the blank. And then they say swipe, which again, kind of taken from social media land. And then the 4 students turn around and they just immediately become that thing. I kind of love where there's not a lot of pre-planned in terms of what those bodies are doing. You can, but that kind of, again, puts the brain in where the body knows better. And that imaginative play of like, oh, now I'm suddenly the Statue of Liberty and we are together going to become the Brooklyn Bridge. And they are tourists in this place. And that just, it will happen if you kind of trust that it can happen. And not to say that there shouldn't be planning. Like you could say, okay, we're going to make pictures of different places here in New York, something like that, and tourists in these places, and show you these things. And that can happen for the narrator, or the teacher can be the narrator to start, certainly. But I do think the kids just inherently get into this playful mode. So then you say swipe, and the kids turn their backs again and become neutral. And then there's another thing. Oh, and here's a picture of where we were trying to get on that Staten Island ferry, but we missed it and we were all so depressed. Swipe. And then you just see the kids, whatever, in a still tableau, looking wistfully out at a boat they didn't get on or something. I don't know.
Right.
But the idea is then, with a little bit of whimsy, the narrator can say, oh, actually it's a slow motion video. And then you just see them going, slowly waving, or actually there's a little bit of sound over it. There's like, you just keep, oh, it's a cat filter. Meow. Like you just keep adding weird stuff on in a wonderfully creative way, and see how far that layering can go. Now, I don't know in what context you need to teach about the Staten Island ferry and missing it, but there are so many other ways that you can then take that just simple premise of a slideshow and make it this kind of real. It's just, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of layer on those quote unquote filters. But if you start with a title that's meaningful to your curriculum, and then actually give them maybe 4 or 5 slides that they could depict, that is a way to just be like, wow, this is so fun and funny. It came to life. Where we want to talk about this scene in Macbeth. And so what are the 5 different plot points that we would want to show? Okay, this is like the witches on the heath. And now we want to see, Macbeth coming up, whatever, just like, where is the literal recollection of the events of something that you've read or studied that can then come into play with slideshow?
Yeah.
So that's important.
I'm imagining that there are so many different variations that could be done. Like I'm imagining if I have a class of 30 kids, I could split them up into groups of 6, give them 5 minutes to plan what they're going to do, and then everybody presents. I mean, I know you were saying that the pre-planning sometimes can stifle the creativity, but it seems like a little bit of pre-planning also
100%.
could. Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And you could have like a simple rubric, like slide 1, what does it look like? Slide 2. And certainly even, when you're teaching persuasive writing, for instance, you could have prompts like, should zoos exist? Should we have, school on snow days or whatever? And then they could create like, look, this is a picture of when I was able to bring my pet to school, or, whatever the thing is. And they will create these hone in on their arguments, but each group having a different prompt is exciting, or each group tackling a different chapter to bring it to life is exciting. And then they're getting a sense of characters and locations and conflict and drama. And then, of course it can devolve into like, it's a fast motion and it gets really silly, but that's where the joy and the play comes in. And giving those limits, like, each group only has 5 minutes to present their slideshow. You can't just keep going on and on.
Right.
Or you do have these, make your titles really excellent and switch off who's narrating. Like absolutely tag team that narrator person, so they're not always the same person.
Yeah. So also just letting people know who are listening, for each one of these games, we're going to give a couple of examples when we're talking, but over on the site, we did a lot of work to make sure that you included examples from a lot of different content areas, so that a social studies teacher, a science teacher, people who teach in different areas, even people who teach sort of the SEL stuff, maybe a guidance counselor that has kids for specials or something like that, can see how these games can be applied to their content areas. So I encourage people to go over and check those out because it will give you ideas for how you could use this in your class. So that was Slideshow. The second game is called Landmarks. Let's learn about that.
Yeah. So landmarks is very movement based in the sense that, it gets kids thinking creatively about places and coming up with a like a physicalization for them. So you can think about settings in, yes, like stories or plays, but also geography locations. And I even, I have an example for geometry, right? So, really, again, the research just shows that when you combine physical activity with words, there's just so much more retention. And so, with landmarks, basically, you can pick like 5 to 10 locations that tie in with whatever you're reading or working on, and then have the students come up with a gesture for each of those locations. So different levels you can think about too, not just gestures, but like where in the room are we going to be? Could we all be huddled in a corner? Is it, is it fun to spread out to the sides of the room? If it feels, again, overwhelming, you have 30 students and you're not going to play all this with everybody, you pick some students who are going to do it from their seats and 5 to 10 kids who are getting up and moving around. And then they tap out, and then the next group rotates in. Or the ones who are in the audience are the ones who are helping the onstage, quote unquote, folks come up with the gestures, right? So everybody, again, is sort of involved, but it doesn't have to be this, like, again, a cacophony of movement.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, again, thinking of not just levels, but like partnerships, again, a bridge, we're going to be two people holding hands in this way. Or, if you're thinking about it with geometry, right? It's like, isosceles triangle, we'll make this 3 people together really narrow. But when the game is, it's almost like a kind of freeze dance vibe. So you can have some music playing. When the music stops, a landmark is called out. There's that working memory and that executive function of like, what did we decide that, we were going to Lake Erie. Oh, we're going to look creepy and be crouching down, like think about what those, and this is, again, for geography, but like think about what those places kind of evoke in a very superficial, light way, but funny and memorable. And I've done it before, even if you're talking geography, where you've like taped out a map of the area on the floor and you actually are like, let's physically go to the place where the Adirondacks are or something, right? That they're actually getting that in their body on the ground, like a giant game of Twister or something.
Yes, which should really help with memory if they're doing something sort of spatially that connects to the thing spatially.
Exactly. And it's just a fun way. So then again, you can assign different kids different roles. So somebody could be the barker, like calling out the landmark. All of these games could become much more child-led. Like, I love to sort of set it in motion, have the helpful scaffolding, and then scoot out of the way, because they want to play this as if it's like almost a playground game. Even if they're in 9th grade, they're like, oh yeah, I got it. And it's the Forest of Arden, or it's, you can just really channel any of these different kinds of locations or settings that you're like, what is this like? And let's kind of recall this in a fun way. And then what's the music, right? And that's a selection, but the DJ can press play and pause, and the barker calls out the landmark, and maybe they keep saying the same landmark, a bunch of times, and then another one, and then another one. And it's like, maybe how many can you get to? This is a brain break. It's a transition game, but it is connected 100% with your curriculum. You do not have to think of it as something that's, oh, we're just going to think of random landmarks. Like, use the settings and the locations in the books that you're reading, or again, like the math or the social studies that you're learning.
So, okay. And so we've got examples for other other subject areas. And so people should come and look at that. Unless, did you want to mention
I
any of
mean,
those?
happy to. I mean, I guess just thinking about, right, like where you don't think of theater games is math. So I like to sort of be like, yeah, you
Yeah.
can use it in math. So like if your sixth grade class is learning geometry, even though obviously it's not technically a landmark, um, it is this kind of fun call and response. So you can just, have some kind of music that's fun to move around to, dance or whatever. You can also kind of call out different, or the Barker person caller outer can call out different ways of moving if they need a little more structure even within that world. Like, okay. And then something like acute angle, music
Mm-hmm.
is paused. We decided already in a group brainstorm that acute angle is like we just make a little V with our body. you know?
Your voice changes every time you say
Yeah,
it
it's
too.
good.
Yeah.
It's
But that can also
playful.
help. That can help
Yeah.
them retain that.
Yeah. Or like right angles, like you go to a corner and you like stand in this because that's a right angle, right? And that
Yeah.
is helpful to remember it.
I'm even thinking you make imaginary, you could actually make them landmarks. It could be right angle lane or something like that. With this is a town, or this is like a neighborhood
Totally.
or something that people
Has
all behave a
these
certain way or
geometric,
whatever. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, exactly what you said. It's like yes and everything because that idea is
Mhm.
brilliant. And you can really, like, if you wanted to make a geometry town and then move around the town and be like, oh, it's Pentagon Alley, then like you have to find five friends and squeeze through the chairs
Mhm.
because it's five-sided figure. Like that's
Yes.
what you have to do there. Um,
Yeah.
or it's 180 degrees nap time, or whatever that place is. You lie down 100, like on the floor, like
Yeah.
one line, 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the kids will come up with these funny things and then they'll feel
Yes.
ownership over, what they've decided. And then listen, you're coming back in from having a special or they're coming back in from lunch and they're a little bit, ooh, and you're like, oh, we're going to play geometry landmarks. Boop, turn on the music. You've already established a few of them. Maybe you keep adding on, they keep adding on. And
Mm.
it's a way to like bridge the gap between, I was just hanging out with my friends and we were having so much fun, to like school.
Yeah. Yep. It's sort of a little bit of both.
Yeah.
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 And I'm noticing also you've also got this tip that teachers could take photos, and I think this would apply to almost any of these games, taking photos of some of these
Yeah.
things that the kids come up with, and that'll aid the memory also.
Absolutely. It'll aid your memory, my memory. I'm like, what did we say? Where did we say 180-degree lane was? What? Or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yep.
helpful. And then, yes, if you're into Google Slides, you just, you can pop that up there and just in the morning be like, let's remember the 5 geometry landmarks that we created. And now, boom, 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 there they are. So some
Mhm.
kids don't feel behind, right? We're all caught
Mhm.
up. And now
Mhm.
let's add a few more. Okay, great. And then when we play it, yeah, I'm going to snap some more pictures so that I remember and so that we all remember.
Yeah. Yeah. This
And
is great.
I think that, just thinking about it is like the kids can also turn and talk and do brainstorms about what they're interested in creating with their bodies too. They can just create that in partnerships or in those small groups like you're talking about. Like maybe
Mhm.
every table group is responsible for coming up with a new landmark for, what are the locations in Kelly Yang's front desk? Okay, great. You guys come up with 5 of them together and then share them out so that
Yeah.
it's collaborative in that way.
Yeah. One of the things I talk about a lot when I present or when I give like education advice or whatever is I just talk a lot about the concept of novelty and how
Mm,
important that is for learning things. That if it's always delivered in the same way, it's harder. And I use Robin Williams as an example in Dead Poet Society. He would just do weird stuff,
yeah,
run out on the soccer field or whatever. But all of these experiences are unique and novel. And
yes,
so when a kid is trying to recall something, it'll be, oh, wait, that was when we were out on the soccer field. And it can jar a new, a fresh memory of that concept.
absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
that's what all of these
Novelty and
do.
memory are so intertwined. That's such a great,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Third game. Don't look behind you.
That's a fun one. I mean, really it's the idea is, okay, so I mean, as a theater teacher, I inherently like things that are a little dramatic. I think it also just engages kids' own sense of like, I'm going to sit up and listen. Like, what's going on? There's
Yeah.
something like, it's why we tell stories. It's like, if I was just talking about something, fine, but if I'm like, okay, and then don't look behind you, but also there's
Hmm.
it's like you immediately lean in. So that phrase
Mm-hmm.
is the starting point for then basically seeing anything connected to curriculum or imaginary behind that group of students. And then they turn around and they either have a reaction to it or they become it. Again, theater has there's many different ways you can kind of work it to your advantage, but either way you're essentially kind of welcoming in this heightened dramatic play even for older students, and this release of movement. Maybe they have to like go do a thing and then they come back to their seat. Maybe there's a clap or a bell cue or something and they're back in, and then a new student comes up like, don't look behind you, but there's and then they find the thing. Now, what that one person is finding is, again, they're sort of have to scoop up some improvisational thing to
Mm-hmm.
work on. It's the
Mm-hmm.
thinking on their feet. It's connected to some larger thing. So again, I mean, thinking about, I know, Midsummer Night's Dream, let's say you're reading that play, and the students are sitting in their chairs normal, and one student comes up and says, don't look behind you, but there's a crazy looking fairy who is wearing a tutu, or I don't know, whatever, like whatever they want to say, named Titania. Like maybe they want to, maybe you give them certain points, like you have to name a character or you have to name a location in your don't look behind you. Tell me
Yes.
something I don't know about this character. There's a really mad dad named Aegeus and he's fuming mad. Ah, and then they turn around and then they're like, wah, don't make me marry
Yes.
that guy. But I think you can invite whatever those things are that you want in a little scaffolding, because the kids are going to be like, well, I get to play this game. Okay, sure. It's not just like come up and list the characters that you remember. It's like come up and
Yeah.
play this game. You have 20 characters here on the board. Pick one that hasn't been picked before. We'll cross off the ones that have already been picked. See that character, and you're this is all, again, that actor thing of perspective, point of view, empathy. Like what is that other person doing, seeing? Now you don't become them, but you're watching them. So
Yeah.
you're watching them, and then the other kids can have a reaction to them. And they're seeing that thing depicted, or they're becoming that character for an instant, and then they're back to themselves. But, science, for instance. So obviously ELA is easy to think about with theater games, but let's say, kids are working on prehistoric time and you're like, look, I have all these periods, Cambrian, Cretaceous, whatever, and also animals or creatures or, prehistoric animals that are connected to these times. And I want you to kind of, come away with this lesson being like, oh yeah, like the pterosaurs are in the Cretaceous era, right? So it's a mix and match moment. They pick a era, they pick a dinosaur who they know, or a creature, whatever, that they know is from that time. And whether it's like, then it's like, okay, there's a, don't look behind you. This is an example from the blog we're writing, but like, don't look behind you. There's a saber-toothed tiger in the Pleistocene era. Like, I don't even know how to say it. My son was like,
I think
this
that's
era.
Pleistocene sounds right. Yeah.
Thanks. Who's stuck in the tar pit. So they all turn around and they either look at or become this saber-toothed tiger. Now, some of them are going to remember those two things, or the student who had to sort of come up with that combination of animal and era is going to, be the one who's like, I got it. And either way, you're inviting kids to be silly, for an instant, become a saber-toothed tiger, what joy, and then back they go. And then they have to be like, okay, trilobites in the Cambrian period, or whatever it is, and use that planning and the skill set that you're, wanting them to acquire, which is something about this order of eras, right? And what's in them.
So the rest of the class could be participating by being the thing, or they could just be watching this.
Right. It's funny too. I mean, again, I bet teachers will hear this and you'll be like, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have three kids being the almost like you could do like a mini scene. You could do it in groups,
Mm-hmm.
right? Five kids. One person says, don't look behind you to
Mm-hmm.
another single person. And then behind that single person are three other people being that thing.
Yes. Yes.
And that's an easy, almost like it's an instant play, right? It
Right.
just takes a second and then they can swap out. And maybe, again, this is just a little organization moment, but kids are numbered 1 through 5. And you start with 1 as the person who says, don't look behind you. 2 is the person who is, and then they just sort of switch orders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And they all get a rotating chance at saying, don't look behind you. There's a blah, 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 creature from the black time. And they all get to, then they can be it. They can look and have that experience of, or maybe they're delighted or, you don't have to always be scared. I mean, I would be scared of all the dinosaurs, but I think you can be, maybe there's delight or maybe there's awe or maybe there's other emotions that come into play. So many of those SEL things, like getting kids to act out even like anxiety or fear or distress in a safe place among their peers is very cathartic and very healthy, right? So and you're also modeling it. You can show them, this is what anger looks like on me. I am that saber-toothed tiger. Or this is what fear looks like on me. And you kind of go, theater lets you go to those extreme places so that, the kids kind of start to feel really seen and known then in that way.
Yeah.
Such a simple way.
I'm thinking there's another interpretation too of the don't look behind you. And I'm thinking of myself. I'm a 7th grader. I approach my friend and the guy that she has a huge crush on is like down the hall. And I go over and I'm like, girl, don't look behind you.
Yes!
Guess who's coming down? Like that's a completely different level of anxiety.
Totally.
But like, that could be the thing too. That could be the feeling too. So it could be played in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. And again, it's just, you can offer those in a word, I mean, what would you call it? Like a little, like a word bubble or something where you're saying like, here are 5 different kinds of ways that you can say, don't look behind you. Yeah. And they can brainstorm those emotions. I mean, here we are with Inside Out 2 mega hit. Like these students know like anxiety, fear, whatever, but also delight and, all of that stuff. I think play around with it and make sure that not all of them are from a place of anxiety because like everything, then the whole game just feels really stressful.
Yeah.
I think whenever we do other games like 4-corner emotion or something, or even saying hello or passing a hello around the circle, easy, pick 5 different ways to say it, 5 different emotions. I always try to end on joy or excitement because that just sort of helps, catapult then the next activity. And we're not all like, I just said hello depressedly and now we have to do something, shoot.
To take this also back into the education world, I'm realizing too that a game like this and the other ones too is a form of assessment that teachers can do with the content. If they have the students or the students say a term and a lot of the other students don't know how to behave because it's kind of like, I'm not familiar with that one. That's a good clue to the teacher that we haven't learned this content well enough yet. And so it's a formative assessment that they're doing.
Absolutely.
With the activity.
I love that. Yeah, totally.
So 4th game and the last game is called Magic Elevator.
Great. Well, I think this is an idea of like a real world thing that kids know, elevators, right? And there's a lot of these games that I speak about in my own work, taxi and, bus stop. These are all, again, classic improv ideas where you're taking this thing that people know and we're going to heighten it, elevate it. So no pun intended, but elevating the elevator game is really saying like, we've ridden in elevators. We know there's a certain structure to them. They're square. Like, let's put some painter's tape on the floor or create a place where we're saying this is going to be our class elevator for this game. There's buttons on them. The buttons could be, and then we can talk about this in a sec, but like certainly you can use math when you're speaking about buttons and floors and up and downs and stuff. And then there's a journey you go. Maybe you didn't intend to go to that floor. That the doors open up and wow, here we are. Again, you're kind of going to be inside of a landscape or some location that is connected to your curriculum.
Mm.
So, it could be a civilization that you're studying, or, a weird dystopian like mathematical land where everything is
Mm-hmm.
angles or something, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the Phantom Toll Booth where there's this a
Mm.
journey and you're like, whoa, I didn't mean to be here. Wow. Like we have to do something now. On these floors,
Mm-hmm.
I like to create a sense of a mission. Kids are so, all young people, they really thrive with the sense of like, what am I doing? Like, what is
Yeah.
my purpose here?
Yeah.
So really activate that sense that on each floor, we have to, boom, X, Y, or Z. Maybe you have to find things that are a certain color or name certain things or list certain things, or I have other examples in the blog, I think, but the feeling like, what are we doing here on this floor will help activate and create an end, like, oh, we did it, we accomplished that mission, and soup, we go back into the elevator
Mm.
to this next floor. So maybe it's you're on a certain, you're exploring different biomes, and here we are in this like tundra biome, and you have to name all the animals, name 20 animals that you see. Again, you're pretending as if you're seeing them, but the kids are, as you said, sort of, there's an assessment there. Who is, I don't even know who's in the tundra. But think about what are the things that you want them to know about the curriculum you're studying. This is why, again, this is not like a oh, another thing I have to do. This is the thing. So they're naming the animals in this tundra biome, or features or whatever. They're seeing them. They're interacting with them. Oh my God, there's this thing, whatever. We go back in the elevator then once you've accomplished
Mm.
that thing, and you get to go to a new biome. That's, one kind of example. But the idea that you really just can create the elevator itself is a little magical portal, and a vehicle, like you would have a rocket ship, or you would have a cool, I don't know, like a Batmobile or something. Like it
Yeah.
taps into that sense of like, I want to like go have an experience somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the idea of even moving around in the elevator, about the math stuff, like maybe you want them to practice skip counting. So this elevator only does counts by twos. So let's count up by twos all the way to 20, and that'll get us to the 20th floor. We can't just press 20. You have to go
Right.
2,
Yes.
4, 6, 8. And instead of just sitting at their desks and being like, okay, let's skip count to 20. Here we go. Not that people are
Yeah.
doing that, but it's just like, this is just another way to activate that. Or maybe it's only prime numbers, or maybe it's only numbers
Mm.
divisible by 3, or something like that. And every day you get to, that alone, taking an elevator, in that way. And I hear you in terms of, we've got 30 kids in the classroom. This is more challenging. So there's different groups every day that get to do the elevator. It's like 5 kids, or this table does the
Yeah.
elevator, and other kids are supporting and saying, applauding, lights, camera, action, or whatever if you want, but also really saying like, this group has to count by 5s, or like this elevator ride goes by 5s, and we're going to these different levels of the ocean because we're studying the ocean. And so this group is counting by 5s, and they're going to the, coral reef zone or whatever. Right. So that
Mm. Mm-hmm.
they're doing something maybe. And it's also very like, old school Dora the Explorer, like something is happening. Maybe you need to put something in your backpack, or save something, or have some sort of heroic moment on the floor
Mm-hmm.
itself,
Mm-hmm.
vis-a-vis creatures, or vis-a-vis, escaping something or whatever. And the kids will come up with it, again, in a small group. If you prompt, this is the side coaching thing that Viola Spolin speaks about too. It's like you can just sort of nudge the learning a little bit from the sidelines. You don't have to be in
Mm-hmm.
the elevator with them, but you do get to be saying like, wait, what do you see over there? What's in that corner? Is that a gray whale? Whatever. And they're like,
Yeah.
it is. What sound is it making? Oh my gosh. What do you have to do to, right? And just kind of keep leveling up their own play with gentle
Right.
acknowledgments and questions.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring these games into schools in the New
Yes.
York area.
Yeah.
Just sort of to close out before we tell people where to go to find your stuff online. What have you observed in the years that you've been doing this in terms of starting with a class that's kind of cold and then implementing some of these games? Do you see a difference maybe in these rooms?
I do. I do. And I've heard the most gratifying thing is hearing from the classroom teachers themselves that they see new sides of students that they never saw before,
Mm,
that they didn't think, they weren't necessarily accessing, right? This ability to like speak extemporaneously. It was like, what? Because we
mm,
don't really ask our students to do that a lot, to
no.
come up with
Mm-mm.
ideas on the spot. But actually those same ideas then propel that student's creative writing in a way that they would not necessarily have had as much access to. But the big thing is really like kind of the joy and the confidence that the like aura, to put it whatever in a TikTok term these days, it's like it gets bigger in the classroom, and that feeling of uplift is really palpable. And so, I think that whether we're thinking, okay, this could be a big project-based learning, we could end the year with like a big Revolutionary War variety show with commercials and, a news hour or whatever, and use theater in that modality, or we could just kind of sprinkle it in, morning meeting stuff or right after lunch or recess. Either way, the students are really just coming out of themselves. And some
Mm.
kids who might not otherwise feel as like seen and known are getting that that benefit that the arts can give. And it's not like a
Yeah.
tag it on. It's not a club. We're not doing it after school or it's some afterthought. It's like the arts in schools is vital. And this is a way to sort of make it front and center into the curriculum, but also, not have it be like this extra thing. It's inside the day.
Where can people find you online?
So a few places, childsplayny.com is really our New York, hub. So if you're in the New
Mhm.
York area and you're interested in classes or camps or that sort of thing, workshops with me or the teachers to come into schools, that's a great place. But
Mhm.
really you can also childsplayinaction.com
Okay.
is the blog, and I write a lot about these games and give tips and ideas there. And Child's Play New York is the Instagram. And I think that's a great way to also reach me directly. And I'm excited to kind of roll out more options for teachers, bite-sized ways to play games that connect with their curriculum and the things that they're excited about teaching.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing this to us. I think this is gonna get a lot of teachers excited about playing these games in their classrooms.
Such a pleasure, Jen. Thank you so much for having me.
For links to all the resources mentioned in this episode, including videos that show you how to play all 4 games and links to Jocelyn's online and in-person offerings, visit cultofpedagogy.com, click podcast, and choose episode 234. To get a bi-monthly email from me about my newest blog posts, podcast episodes, courses, and products, sign up for my mailing list at cultofpedagogy.com/subscribe. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.